This is Hibshi.
Hey.
This is Yasmin.
Okay. Hey, Yasmin.
And this interview is on Decibel.LK because Hibshi has done something very cool.
What have I done?
Lots. Let's find out. So we're talking to Hibshi today because Hibshi did something very cool. He's hit 2 million plays on Spotify.
2 million total streams on my account. Yay.
Dude, how did you even get to that number?
Okay, before we talk about the numbers, before we talk about the music, before we talk about the strategy that makes all of this work, let's talk about how late we are to this conversation as a country, because Spotify has been around for a while. It's the largest audio streaming platform in the world right now. There's barely Sri Lankan artists even hitting 50 to 100,000 streams on it, which to me is like, why hasn't it happened already? So I feel like it's a conversation we need to have because that's a healthy stream of revenue for most artists around the world, including myself. So it's something that all of us need to be tapping into. Which brings me to the 2 million streams. To me, that is it's not that impressive yet. I know it sounds good on paper, but to me this is, okay, my account has hit 2 million streams, which is like a cumulative figure, including about 4 songs and a few others that did very moderately. But I have Cold Beer, which is now nearing 1 million streams. I have Missing You, which has done a little over 500,000. And when you put all that together, you get 2 million streams. But ideally, the goal is to hit 2 million on individual records in the coming year or so.
How did you manage to get yourself into Spotify since, Spotify is not really available in Sri Lanka?
Okay, if I was to rewind, right, there was a time when I was trying to make English music and people were telling me, I'm sure you've heard this too, you can't make English music in Sri Lanka and make money. That's not really a thing yet. I mean, you might perform shows and make a little bit out of that, but the music itself doesn't generate that much of an income. It actually generates barely anything. So I kind of lived with this idea for a while that you can't make money out of English music. And I had pretty much given up on the idea of making money, but I wanted to make music. And what happened was, I started looking at all of these big YouTube channels that were promoting like artists that I loved, from big artists to the up-and-comers, right? I spent about 2 years, I think from 2015 onwards, I sent a bunch of songs to so many different YouTube channels, and I got rejected every time because the songs weren't good enough, right? And that's like, I feel like that's, the ground level step one that people need to understand. Like, you have to make sure your songs are good enough. I say this every time we talk, right? And so I got rejected for like 2 years, and that's when that rejection just kind of kept fueling me to do better. And finally I got my sound together with this song called Yours Truly. And Yours Truly did kind of well for me. And then I made Cold Beer, right? And I knew Cold Beer was kind of special. And I reached out to a couple of different YouTube channels. I didn't really understand labels. I didn't understand Spotify at that time, but I just wanted to get it onto a big channel because that would mean views, right? So I reached out to this channel called Mr. Revels, and they loved the song and they wanted to upload it. And they insisted that they release it on their label and we share the revenue. That's the first time I had heard of, oh my god, music is going to bring me money, okay? So I still didn't have high expectations, but we ended up releasing this song internationally, on YouTube. They put it up on this channel with 2 million plus subscribers. It went on Spotify, it went on Apple Music and all these different platforms. And I just started watching Spotify, and I'll get into how Spotify works and how you push your music. But, from where I was standing, I had this song that in a month, it hit about 100,000 streams on Spotify. And I was like, okay, this is,
Which song is this?
Cold Beer, right? So I wasn't familiar with like that kind of numbers as of yet, right? So then a couple months passed, we're at 300,000, and then that just kept going. And right now we're sitting at about 800,000 streams on Spotify on Cold Beer. And on YouTube, we have a couple 100,000 streams. One channel has about 1.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, and so on. So the first thing to understand is that when you have the right type of song, it just works. I mean, I can't break down what about Cold Beer has made it work, but it works for some reason. And that converted into money. I started receiving royalty checks and so on, and that made me realize, look, you can actually have a career doing this, right? So Cold Beer kind of did that for me. And then I had a bunch of other songs, and they all kind of they're doing okay, but I'm trying to figure out how we can do much better with each individual record.
And that was your gateway to Spotify. Did you create an individual account after that?
On Spotify, the songs come out on your account. It's not like YouTube. On YouTube, I have my release strategy is generally to work with bigger channels, but on Spotify, it's all on my account. And right now, on average, my account does about 60. It has about 60,000 monthly listeners. So that's a decent number, to start with.
That's interesting. How did you open a Spotify account?
We don't have it in this region. I mean, Sri Lanka doesn't have Spotify, and a few other parts of Asia doesn't have it yet, but I'm sure it'll be here not long from now. But for me, I can't take a lot of credit for, having an account and having a verified account on Spotify and so on, because the label took care of it for me, right? That made it easier for them to put the song out there and generate an income and all of that. But if I'm not mistaken, anybody from Sri Lanka can release on Spotify and other platforms using TuneCo and CD Baby and all of these different platforms. You can get your song on Spotify. I'm not entirely sure about the verification process and so on, but I'm pretty sure anybody from any part of the world can do that part of the process.
2 million and counting. Were you expecting this?
Not really, but I have started to aim much higher at this point. But I think going into 2017, my goal was I want to hit a few 100,000 streams on my songs, and I accomplished that, and that has now accumulated into this 2 million figure. But yeah, I am expecting much better results from now on, because I kind of understand how it works and what it takes.
For us in Sri Lanka, do you think this is the platform for now, apart from YouTube?
I think for anybody making English music, it's definitely a platform worth considering, because I mean, the actual reality is that we don't have a massive audience in Sri Lanka for English music, obviously. We have a decent audience, but it's not big in any terms, right? Because the population of Sri Lanka is 20 million, great. But then I suppose when it comes down to English music, best case scenario, it would be 5 million people out of that. And that is really a stretch, right? The important thing to understand is when you make English music, you're not making it for Sri Lanka, you're making it for anybody speaking English. And that's the whole world. And that's what platforms like Spotify and Apple Music do, because now you're putting your song out into the world. I feel like YouTube doesn't let you do that very well just yet, because when you release music, English music from Sri Lanka on YouTube, you're still reaching a lot of Sri Lankans. I don't understand the platform that well, to be honest, the technical side of it, but Spotify and Apple Music, if I was to break it down to you, what happens on Spotify is, okay, I think a lot of Sri Lankans are familiar with SoundCloud, and on SoundCloud, if your song gets reposted by a bigger SoundCloud account, lots more people discover your song. On Spotify, the goal is to get your song shared or featured on a bunch of different playlists, and playlists is kind of the goal. So if you make a future-based song or a pop song, you're looking at all these different massive playlists around the world, that some of which are owned by Spotify, some of which are owned by individual music curators. Like Decibel, for example, could own a Spotify account and have a playlist dedicated towards pop music. And my goal is to get my song featured on your playlist and all the other playlists in that genre. And the more that people feature your music, the more it gets discovered by their audiences and so on. And that's what I'm essentially doing. If we were talking about cold beer, for example, I made cold beer, and it went on the whole Mr. Revil's platform, and it got supported by their individual Spotify playlists and his friends and their friends and so on. And that just led to the song hitting 700,000 streams. And I was a fairly new artist at that point. Nobody knew me. So the idea is just, it's influencer marketing, but related to music.
Cold beer, what makes it so special, and how did it reach that many counts?
Before we both get cold feet, tonight let's be ourselves. Tonight let's be ourselves.
Man, I have no idea. I mean, I think some songs just work. You can't really break it down yet. The second biggest song would be Missing You for me, and Cold Beer and Missing You have nothing in common, right? Like, they sound quite different from each other. So I can't really tell you what makes it work, but some songs just do. Because, I mean, there are songs that I go into thinking, oh my god, this song is going to do so well, and those tend not to. Sometimes, like, for example, Bad, which is a song that I really like. It's got high production value and all of that stuff, but it didn't do well for me in terms of numbers. I mean, I'm proud of the record, but it didn't do well in terms of numbers. So you can't always call it, but sometimes it happens.
I remember you telling me one of the reasons why cold beer got its numbers was because of the fact that it had the word beer on it.
Right, right. So what I was telling you was, I remember the last time we talked about it, we couldn't say the word beer. Anyway, okay. So what happened was, so I released Cold Beer. Me and a friend of mine in India helped me with some of the promo. I think in the first week, I woke up this one day and I had 15,000 new listeners in Germany, right? And I'm like, okay, what the hell is going on? And to me, like, I don't know if this is really the truth of it or whatever, but my explanation was that, at least what made sense for me at the time, was that Germany was one of the highest beer consuming countries in the world, right? They have this whole, I think even Oktoberfest comes from Germany, right? So they have this massive beer culture, and I think the word beer just worked there, right? So Germany is currently my second biggest audience on Spotify after America, right? So I think Cold Beer kind of started that. So it's weird. I mean, so far it goes, I think US, Germany, Netherlands, France, and so on. So my account is doing well in Europe and US, which you have to understand are big, like, English music listening regions, so it works there.
I know that there is no formula, but for those who want to put out their music on Spotify and stuff, what kind of advice would you give them?
I feel like there is a bit of a formula to that. You have to always understand that putting a song somewhere is not enough. I mean, uploading it or getting it on the platform is just the first step of the process. I would say it's not even step one, it's like step 0, right? You have the song on there. But then begins the whole promotion aspect of it. It's a matter of reaching out to all these different influencers. Like on YouTube, you have these channels with massive, like 2 million, 3 million subscriberships. Spotify has those playlists, like I touched on before, and SoundCloud has accounts. So it's a matter of reaching out to all these different people and trying to get them to support your music. And that's what has worked for me, and that's what will work for you. You can't expect to hit those numbers on your own, but you have to make songs that are good enough for others to want to feature it on their playlists and support it, right? I think another interesting thing is you have to get creative with how you reach out to these people, because these people get hundreds or some get thousands of submissions a day, right? They're not going to sit and listen to everything. Sometimes they open an email, and if your first paragraph is too lengthy, that's it. They're not even going to listen to your song, right? So one of the interesting things we did around the time we released Cold Beer was we made memes and we sent them to all these different curators, right? And I feel like incidentally, around the time we released Cold Beer, there was this popular meme going around that said, "Crack a cold one open with the boys," right? So we kind of used that to our advantage, and we sent memes to like music promoters, and that was the caption, right? And because of that, we got like more people just interested in opening our email. So I feel like even that the part of reaching out to promoters and curators, get creative with that process, and that's gonna help you even more. Don't just be another generic email, right? Please support my song.
So 2 million on Spotify and counting. What does this mean to you as a producer?
I feel like it's credibility more than anything. Not to say that when you have fewer numbers, you're less credible as a musician, because it really doesn't mean that you're a bad musician or anything of that sort. But in this climate and with the way the world is right now and how streaming is so important to musicians, having good numbers, and like I said, 2 million to me is not even touching the surface of what I want to do. At this point, even having 700,000, 500,000, whatever it is, it looks good, you know, for a fairly new artist. So I feel like it adds to that credibility.
New music. What can we expect from you in the future?
Right. So I announced a couple of months ago that I'm on a hiatus, right? So no, I mean, I'm not going to be putting out English music for a few more months, because I want to figure out what I want my next sound to be and how that's going to go out into Spotify, Apple Music, and all these platforms, and what's really going to work for the next phase of my career. Having said that, I don't want to be totally quiet in terms of music, so I've decided to put out some singular music during that time, right? So, yeah. So I think
Singular music?
Yeah.
With who?
Well, they're going to be, you know, my songs, but I'll be featuring all of these different artists like I always do. Okay. Anyway.
Name drop?
Nah, not yet. Because nothing's final yet, but I have a couple of really cool songs in the works. I've got this really cool dance hall record coming out. And you know, me making happy music. It's just like, woo. Anyway, and I've got another future-based song that's in Sinhala. So I feel like a few different artists right now have started tapping into the local like electronic scene. Like Iraj is doing future bass, and a few other artists are putting out electronic stuff. So I feel like this would be a good time to do that for Sinhala music as well, because we don't really have that much going on. So that'll be interesting.
You co-produced some tracks for him. What did that feel like, and how did that happen?
Right. I think Iraj heard Cold Beer, if I'm not mistaken, and just hit me up saying he liked my sound, and since then I've been kind of co-producing some of his new material, which to me is like major, because I told you before, I grew up listening to this guy, right? So it's major for me, and I'm really enjoying it. He actually just dropped a new single that I co-produced. Yay! So yeah, that's always fun.
Anything you want to tell people out there who are just starting off?
I say this all the time, but quality is definitely very important. Always make sure, from the songwriting to the mix and master, your songs sound good. And yeah, I feel like that's step one. And once you have that, just get creative with the way you promote it. Like I said before, don't be just another generic person who slides into inboxes or emails with the same message of support my music. Get creative with that process if that's what you need. And yeah.
Well, it's nice talking to you, man, and looking forward to Matt's stats and you putting Lanka on the map on different places.
Let's do this, and thank you, Decibel, as always.